right, everybody. Welcome back to the Grow Your Moving Company podcast. I'm your host, Wade Swikle, CEO of Two College Brothers Moving and Storage based here in Tampa Bay, Florida. And today's guest is a speaker at the Moving Titan Retreat, as well as a newly published author. The book is called Heavy Lifting, Building a Business with a Giant Heart, by the one and only founder of Gentle Giant Moving Company, Mr. Larry O'Toole. And Larry has built an incredible business. For those of you who may not know, which I think most people in the moving industry know of Gentle Giant because they truly are a giant independent moving company in the moving industry based up in Boston. They do over $60 million a year in revenue with over 600 employees currently staffed and 26 offices around the country. And they share my colors of purple and gold. They throw a little green in there as well. So a little different, but a fantastic company that I've heard nothing but just absolutely amazing things about over the years. And it's been a privilege and an honor, Larry, to get to know you and to be able to have conversations like this, because you truly are, and I'm just so grateful that you've instilled that knowledge on paper. Larry, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for coming on. And if you don't mind, just say a few words. What led you to write the book and talk a little bit about your journey growing Gentle Giant?
Right. Well, I'd always thought it'd be nice to write a book. I hesitated because, I didn't know if I would be capable of writing a book that I could be proud of. So I kind of held off. But people would always tell me, you need to tell your story. You need to tell your story. And I thought, well, what better way to tell the story than to write a book about it? But, growing up in Ireland, you may not be aware of the Christian Brothers. They're famous for their corporal punishment. Nowadays, that's somewhat frowned upon. I don't know if they can get away with it anymore. But they really worked on, your writing ability and knowing how to write and do it well. But they also worked on convincing me that I was terrible at it and that I would never amount to anything. And everything I wrote was covered with their red marks. And I was let know that, I needed to go back to the drawing board and do it over. So I always thought, I'm never going to be a writer, God knows. But I think the bit of education they gave me helped, because I think people have told me the book is pretty well written. Hopefully you got that feeling from it. And it took me several false starts, a few years ago after COVID, I thought, well, I'll take advantage of COVID and write a book. But to be honest, it wasn't anything I was happy with. So it was several do-overs. But now I have a book that I'm proud of and feel good about.
Well, you certainly should be proud of it because it is authentic. I feel like I hear your voice in the words that are on the paper, and I can tell it's truly coming from your heart. And one of the things that I read early on, towards the beginning of the book, is that HEART is actually an acronym for your core values. And I think that, everything that I've heard and know about you, you truly do not only live your life by those core values, but you have had this ability to instill those core values in your company that it truly does operate by. I think so many small businesses, myself included, when you first get started off, maybe you read a book or you hire a consultant and they tell you got to have the core values. And I fought that early on because I just thought it was like fluff. Nobody's going to acknowledge these. Like, it didn't feel right. And years later, we ended up revamping those core values that the consultant told us that we should have to be something that actually meant something to me and how I operate and live my life. But I'm just curious, what prompted you to even come up with core values, and how have you been able to so effectively distill those in your business?
Okay, well, first of all, just like yourself, I wasn't thinking about core values when I started the business. I was just thinking, will this experiment work? Because for me, it was a bit of an experiment. Every mover I spoke to had said that the biggest challenge was finding good people. And that puzzled me because there's plenty of good people out there. So I started it with that one business plan was to hire really good people, nice people, people with a great work ethic, people who are caring, compassionate, kind people who are obviously physically fit for the work, but more than anything, people that you would enjoy spending a tough, hard day working with. 8, 12 hours of grinding physical labor that you would be having it, the kind of people you'd be having a great time with. Because to me, and what I tell our people on their first day is it's either the best job in the world or the worst job in the world. And what makes it the best job in the world are the people you're working with. And what makes it the worst job in the world are the people you're working with. So you want to be working with people who are enthusiastic, upbeat, fun, cracking jokes, and the tougher it gets, the more fun they are. Uh, and so those are the kind of people I hired, and I was lucky because I knew a lot of those kind of people from the rowing community that I was a part of. And the culture really evolved from those people. And of course, some years later, like yourself, I read in a book the importance of having your core values. But also, when I asked people who stuck around a lot longer than expected, like, you need somebody for the summer, they're going to work, they'll be there for 3 months or so. But lo and behold, they're still with you 3 or 4 years later. And when you'd say, I thought you were going to go on and be a teacher or scientist or whatever, they'd always say, oh, yes, of course I am. But I'm putting that off because I'm having such a great time because I just love this culture. And they would refocus on the idea of maybe with a couple of buddies saving the money to go on trips. I had groups of guys go Patagonia, base camp in Nepal. A few groups went up Mount Kilimanjaro. People went to Australia. And it's so wonderful when they do that because when they come back, they'll be dead broke and they'll have to work their butt off to get to where they need to go to move on with their life. So, but like I said, they would just talk about the culture. And I knew I had to define the culture for one thing, because as you saw yourself by reading, it's important to have those core values, but also because I wanted to be able to define this culture they're talking about to people coming in the door. So what we did was we maybe had about 50 movers at the time, and we said, listen, when you go home this weekend, write down what you think are the 5 core values that define our culture. And so everybody did that, but needless to say, that was a very long list. And we narrowed it down to about the 20 that were pretty universal from everybody, and then compressed them into the 5 core values that we came up with, which we thought incorporated everything they said. For instance, one of our core values is going above and beyond, but I don't remember that anybody actually wrote that down, but so many things they did write down fit under that label of going above and beyond. So getting our values down, and luckily they fit into an acronym of HEART, HEART, which is honesty, enthusiasm, going above and beyond, respect, and teamwork. And it incorporated everything in the culture. But the most important thing about culture is that our core values is that you don't just throw them up on a wall and forget about them or mention them during orientation or something like that. There's something you have to live by and hire and fire by, basically. You evaluate everybody based on those core values. And if behavior doesn't coincide with any of them, that person really doesn't belong with you, because you need those kind of people if you're going to be successful. But values are just words for those qualities. What's most important is that you can pinpoint the behaviors that really come from those values. Like, what are the behaviors that go along with being honest, that go along with being respectful? What kind of behaviors fit that mold? And just keeping it top of mind for your people, mentioning them at the start of every meeting, talking about them, complimenting people who exemplify those values and do things that really are beautifully demonstrative of some of those different values. And it's great when you can see those and compliment people for that. We miss the days when we would all meet for the monthly meeting. I mean, it's sort of, we still have people there, but a lot of people are online and it's not quite the same. But there's nothing like getting everybody together in one big room. But, you know, you have to keep talking about it. I think it's important and it's worked for us.
Now, how, when you're small and you're working with a tight knit group of people, it's easy to be, I'm not necessarily easy, but it's easier to be, that first team that you bring in. It's easier to kind of all have that in common, that those values mean something to you and the people that you're surrounding with. But I think a lot of times what happens is, as you grow, as you encounter new obstacles, sometimes, that those get set aside a little bit, at least talking about it, because we got to figure out this problem right now, or this customer won't pay their bill, or, we had somebody call out today, and it's not necessarily always the time to be like, well, remember, heart is our core value at the start of this day, when we, kind of faced these crises early on. I mean, how do you keep perpetuating that when the going gets tough?
Well, it's a huge challenge, but what you said earlier, when you have a small group in the beginning, then it's easier to form that culture. But see, most people, they don't even have that. I mean, you go right back to the beginning and they kind of have the opposite, because there's a little bit of that big fish in a small pond syndrome, where you have certain people who are maybe trying to push their way on top of everybody else. For instance, you could have a case where you've got some people out on a job. It's going to be charged by the hour, and you have somebody saying, wait a minute, we want to get 8 hours out of this. Why don't you just slow down a little bit? Now, if that kind of person or that kind of attitude is there in the beginning, forget about it. You're done. You know, stick a fork in that. You'll never really get anywhere. It's irredeemable. However, as you get bigger and you have a culture that's well established and that you have really worked on, and somebody says something like that, then everybody knows we don't want this person here. You know, we want them out of here. And, you know, like when you have like the hustle factor.
That's one of our core values, actually, is hustle.
Yeah, hustle, we call it enthusiasm.
Sure,
But
sure.
yeah, because a lot of people did actually have hustle on their list, but we felt enthusiasm kind of incorporated hustle, because enthusiastic people hustle, but hustle. So you're out there and everyone is hustling. Well, you know what? If you hire somebody and that annoys them, they'll just leave. You know, this gets old after a while. Why can't we slow down? You know, why aren't we taking more breaks? Why aren't we just, so that person is going to kind of get spit out. But in terms of preserving culture, if you keep that person around, there's going to be a lot of noise. People are going, what the hell? Did you have to work with that guy? I can't believe it. I mean, oh my God, he's just dragging us back. And there'll be racket. And then if you get another person like that, there'll be even more noise. And people will be making even more noise. And three people. And now it's like, what's happening to this place? It's not what it used to be. You know what happens when you let a fourth one through the net? Now, I'm just arbitrarily picking a number, but it's probably the fourth one. Silence. All that noise stops because, oh, I guess this is how it's going to be. And nobody says anything anymore. And that's what you have to guard against, because you have to have people who really care. I mean, I've heard stories from people who've worked for other moving companies where somebody would steal something. And yeah, people would have been upset about it. Like one person told me about a mover that was taking things out and hiding them in the bushes in the backyard so they could come back at night and grab them. That way, nobody would see them actually leaving with the stuff, and the other movers weren't going to see it either. Well, now you have a situation where who's going to rat them out? And if you have a culture where people go, okay, this is bad, but I don't want to be the one who's, you know, going to be the stool pigeon or whatever it is, then you're in massive trouble. So you have to have a culture where people see something dishonest and they immediately speak up.
Hey movers, it's Wade Swikle and you're listening to the Grow Your Moving Company podcast. If you've ever wasted money on marketing to the wrong homes, listen up. This is why I use USA Home Listings. They're the only platform in the moving industry built by movers that not only has new home listings and under contract listings updated daily, but now offers enhanced data that can eliminate vacant homes and give you phone numbers and emails for both homeowners and realtors, giving you multiple ways to connect and close more jobs. Their vacancy AI tool removes empty homes so there are no more wasted mailing efforts, and their Tier 2 data takes it further, providing highly accurate contact details for both homeowners and realtors for email, phone, and social outreach. The result? Higher conversions, stronger ROI, and more book jobs with less spend. Check out usahomelistings.com because it's where real movers get real leads.
I hired a guy once, and all he did was take a bottle of soda water or something out of the fridge that was the customer's. No, he didn't ask permission. He took a few swigs, and then he just pushed it into the couch so it would be there, like under the couch cushion. Well, it's only a bottle of soda, but everybody ratted him out. Get him out of here. It didn't get to the point where he had a chance to steal something valuable. So you have something where people know this is what we represent and this is not tolerable. And if you have somebody like that, whether it's that business of stealing something minor, like what's the big deal? It's only a bottle of soda. What's the big deal? Well, that person has the potential to do whatever. Everybody around them must know we don't want this person on the team. We can't trust this person. End of story. And culture is something that has to be worked on all the time. Because when you talk about losing culture because you get distracted by other things as time are going, and the biggest problem is when you're short of labor and you need to hire people, and you find somebody who's capable of doing the job, and somebody walks in the door who's worked for another moving company and they have all the skills necessary, and maybe they've already driven trucks and collected bills and bills of lading. There's a real, oh wow, this guy is going to really help. We can book more work. Yeah, maybe, and maybe they'll be a super, like, sometimes you get lucky and you get somebody great like that. But also, maybe not. Maybe this person has all those capabilities, but they're also not the best person in the world in terms of reliability and trust. And you got to resist hiring that person, and you've got to have a system so you know that you have a person like this right away and out the door. And I think in any business, it's so important in the first few weeks. Like they say, probationary periods are like 3 months or something. But it's very rare that you don't know everything you need to know after I used to know within a day, but within a few weeks, you should know. You shouldn't have to wait 3 months. I mean, sometimes there's a particular issue that's definable, and you can say to somebody, look, you're on probation. We've had a couple of situations where we've said to somebody, okay, we're extending your probation period for another 3 months, but it's rare. And that would be specific. It's the behavior that's isolated and that you hope you can get past. But if it's just a character issue, boom, that person you should know, and they should be gone really quickly. And sometimes you're going to hire people who are good bullshit artists because they're great in the interview, they know what to say, but you're not going to fool anybody on a moving crew.
Mhm.
You know, it's real honest work, and that's why I love movers. I mean, it's tough, hard work, and it's like a brotherhood because when you meet another mover, they know what a tough physical job this is, and you have an immediate connection with that person. But you have to be careful about the people who are movers because they can't get a job doing anything else. It's as opposed to, I mean, a lot of people love it. I mean, I had a crew chief retire at 71, still running jobs right up to the end. That's what he wanted to do, and he loved doing it. And I've had other people that just love it. I mean, so many people say, well, I'm getting too old for this. It's funny, I got into the business. Well, when I started officially, I was already 35, but did my first moves. I was 30 years old. And, I hear people 32 say, oh, I'm getting too old for this.
I'm 35, about to be 36, and I feel like the aches and pains are starting to, creep up. But I get what you're
Well, yeah.
saying.
And of course, to that point, I think you really need to work hard on the physicality, and like we have a chiropractor on staff and physical therapy and stuff like that. Because you don't want people working hurt. I mean, you got to take care of those aches and pains because if you do, you're still going strong right until you're 70 years old. I mean, and that was the case for me. I mean, I could go out and help on a move right up. Even today, I'd probably get a little gassed, but I'm not going to be complaining about the aches and pains because I work hard on keeping my body where I need it and reacting when there's a problem. And I see, seeing a physical therapist when you need, but you need to take care of your body. You really do. I mean, you see people like I've seen people on moving crews for other companies where they're walking with a bit of a thing.
Hmm.
They're kind of adjusting, and that's bad.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Yeah. I read in your book you had somebody that I guess recently retired at 71 that worked for you for years and years and years. And
Right, right,
that's impressive. But
right.
one of my questions is like, how do you know if they're not just BSing you in the interview? I think like even me, I feel like I walk around the warehouse, I walk around the trucks, and people want to kind of put on a show. They want to tell you what you want to hear. Whether it's me or a leader, within my company. And you mentioned that you can tell oftentimes within a day if this
Well,
person's the real deal.
that's well, certainly when I was out on a job working
Sure.
with, yeah, no, it's a lot harder otherwise. Just to
But are
know.
there like tests or some kind of like,
I
small
don't,
little
well,
things?
no, I think our business is such that, and if you have a strong enough culture, people will know. I mean, you can only hide laziness just so long.
Mm,
If you don't want to work hard, it's hard to pretend. The only way to pretend is to work hard, actually work hard. And somebody say, well, I'm just pretending I'm going to do this till I don't have to. And you hear that a little bit with what they call towny disease. Somebody's going to work until they've established themselves, and then they're going to dial it back. So it's look. There's nothing. I don't think there's anything foolproof. But what I am saying is we've been successful in having people call out bad behavior when they see it, and that is very important because when you see that happening, you can feel pretty good that they're just not going to put up with stuff. And it's why I don't know if you probably do this too, but we move our crews around. Like you don't know who you're going to be working with from one day to the next. So you're working with different people every day. And if you put a team together, like I know moving companies where they have their teams and they'll even call certain teams A teams, B teams, C teams. But when you do that, the thing that is always going to happen is you're going to have uneven quality because you'll get teams that are just really, really great, teams that are not. It's going to be very up and down. You want to have universal conformity between every crew. Like when somebody's on a Gentle Giant crew or a College Brothers crew, they know exactly what's going to happen. They're not going to say, oh, good, I'm working with that crew chief. I can kind of dial it back today.
Mhm.
They got the same thing all the time. That way, it's very hard for somebody because if you have a team, then a certain individual can sort of start to become dominant. You invite people home for dinner, you introduce them to the sick mother-in-law, you make that kind of connection, and you know what? Pretty soon, you're not going to out them in any way. You're pretty much, that's human nature. You're going to feel like a traitor now if you say anything, and you're under pressure. So
Mhm.
it's important that you don't let that happen where somebody's able to force their will on everybody else because this is how they want to do it.
Mhm.
Uh, you can't do that if you're working with a different crew each day.
Yeah, that's that. I see that happen where guys become buddies. And you might have a really solid guy, and then all of a sudden some bad habits from somebody else starts to rub
Right.
off because they're friends or they're trying to, you know, get along and they don't want to like rat on the other guy. And I mean, with a company as big as yours with over 600 employees, I mean, how are you getting the buy-in to stay loyal to the company as opposed to their buddies that they get to know, that they're working in the trenches with? Obviously, we're paying them as a company. They're earning a living, but that only goes so far in getting buy-in because they could, go and find another job if
Right.
probably for more money somewhere. So like where does the buy-in come from for people to perpetuate that culture?
Well, first of all, that's one of the reasons it's important to get it right in the beginning and move people on early in the game because then them becoming buddies is great.
Hmm.
They're buddies and they take pride in the same thing. And like somebody has a little bit of the flu or they're under the weather or maybe they have a hangover. And, the buddy is going to really give him the easy job. Like, okay, I'll take care of this. Why don't you load the truck or why don't you reassemble this furniture while we're running a heavy box or something like that? People will have your back. But the person has already earned their stripes and established themselves. I mean, there's no silver bullet that'll tell you that, you haven't made any mistakes. But I can't think of a very serious problem that we've had over the years. But one of the things we do is we promote from within. So those 26 offices are all run by people who started at General Giant at entry level and came up through our leadership program and our training and coaching and everything else. So, that's what in the beginning, what I thought was the only way we were going to be able to consistently preserve the culture. Well, does that work? Well, when I visit our offices, that's what I see. I see it working. And I see the customer response being consistent and people taking pride in the same thing. And of course, bringing people up to Boston for some training and taking them up, and maybe because, Harvard Stadium only exists in Boston. So somebody comes in from one of the offices, and guess what? They next day they're on the stadium, with me or something like that. And people love it. And by the way, like just on Monday, I had 6 or 7 new people. Now, I was pretty surprised because it's unusual to be hiring people in July. So I was a little concerned because, but you get people saying to you, you say, well, what made you decide to come to Gentle Giant? Some people will actually say, I love the idea that you have this stadium because that way I know I'm not going to have to work with any athletes, any wasters or the wrong kind of people. They if you're a hard worker, the last thing you want to do is have to carry somebody else.
Mhm.
You want to be out there with people who are up to your standard and are going to work just as hard as you're working. And you want to be, whether you say it out loud or not, you're going to be upset if somebody is lollygagging or hiding in the bathroom or doing whatever nonsense. That's going to be upsetting. People don't like that.
Hey everybody, Wade here, and I've got an awesome game-changing announcement for you. Now, I know a lot of you guys are constantly asking, how do we get more leads? How do we get better leads? You're tired of spending way too much money for pay-per-click or buying leads or LSA, whatever it may be, only to get low-paying customers that become a headache with small moves, and you don't get an ROI on those jobs. Well, the exciting news is that our friends at Moversville have just launched a new product called the Realtor Referral Engine, where they not only get in front of realtors, but they command direct response, replies, and referred business. I'm super pumped about this, but don't just take my word for it. My friend Austin Yarborough over at Central Coast Moving and Lucky Day Moving and the Moving Army, I know he's got a bunch of them, just like me. That's why we're friends. Has gotten over 40 direct replies from realtors in his first month of using the Realtor Referral Engine from Moversville. And then there's Scott with ABC Moving Systems. He's booked over $30,000 in work and made over 20 new realtor connections. What can an extra $30,000 a month do for your business? Here's what makes this kind of marketing different. These aren't just one and done jobs. These are realtors who keep referring large jobs, can introduce you to the other members of their brokerage, and then those moves can start referring more and more jobs. You have to stay front of mind though. So if you want to learn more about the Realtor Referral Engine by Moversville, head on over to moversville.com and book a quick 15-minute call with my friend Tim, who runs the place. He'll know exactly what your business needs to get set up. He can do it all to make sure that you're getting high ticket jobs at a fraction of the cost of other marketing sources. I think you're going to be happy that you did that. Don't sleep on this one. Go check out moversville.com. Look for the 15-minute intro call with Tim and report back with your results so that I can talk about them here on the show. Thanks for tuning in.
And when you have a really hard box run on a job, of course, you may not get as much of it down there where you get the flights of stairs that we get here in Boston. But if you are doing a hard box run on the stairs, you expect everybody to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
I remember
for those listeners who don't know, you're legendary for putting new hires through the ringer at the Harvard Stadium. And I was in Boston a few years ago and had the privilege to try it out myself just independently. And it's tough. That's a very difficult weed out process. Are you still doing the stadium early on in their employment or during the interview process to weed them out?
I have been every day that I'm available. I mean, I'm going to Ireland next week, so I'll probably miss a couple of days. But yeah, Mondays and Thursdays.
And is it always with you, or is it like other leaders on your team taking out the new,
Well, there's others, but I try to be there if I'm available. So I'm usually there. And Tom O'Gorman is usually there.
And so basically you look for certain character traits. How are they going to handle this? Can they get it done in a certain amount of time? Am I correct on that?
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, we give people 40 minutes, for instance, to do the stadium. Did you do the whole thing when you were there?
I think so. I think I did it around 29 minutes, and I wasn't sure if I did the right top decks, but I did all of the main staircases.
29 minutes is what I would have predicted because you running marathons and stuff. Now, actually, if they break 30 minutes, I give them money. Like, for instance, if you break 30 minutes, it's $25. But I had to give a guy $150 the other day because he did it in 24 something. And I had to give a guy $250 last year because he did it in 21 minutes. But it's rare that someone's going to be that fast. Now, if you're in shape, you should be able to do it under 40 minutes. But if you're not in shape, you're not. You're not going to get around in 40 minutes if you're not in shape. But if you're going to be a mover, that's not a problem because you'll get in shape. So what we're looking at isn't did you finish in 40 minutes, is that how hard did you try?
Mm.
How hard did you give it everything? Or did you just sort of dial it in and just take your time and just do it because you know you had to do it? Because that's what you want to see. Because on the stadium, and you probably remember this, the first 6 to 10 sections are no big deal. Then it gets tough. Like you hit a kind of a wall and it starts to get tough. And that's when you have to decide, am I going to dig in or am I going to slow down? Am I going to stop and rest or am I going to push this because I want to be proud of how much I did? And we had a few guys a week or two ago. They were all close. I mean, they were within the 40, they had maybe 3 sections left after 40 minutes. And well, 3, 2, 1, they were in that area. And you couldn't have stopped these guys with a 2x4. No, I'm not stopping. I want to finish. And that's the kind of attitude you're looking for. Now,
Mm.
if somebody has 7 or 10 sections left, you're not going to wait around for them to finish. But you're looking, what did you put into it? And of course, if somebody is very heavy, like, big guy, but 280, I even had a 300 pounder there a couple of weeks ago. Even if they're in shape, they're not going to do it in 40 minutes.
Sure.
It's just too much work. But you see the attitude and what they're bringing to it. Yeah, I think it's good to have a test, and it doesn't have to be the stadium. Obviously, our team in North Carolina, for instance, have a CrossFit routine that everyone they hire has to do, and they have it there in the warehouse. But it could be anything.
Mm.
It could be a hill run or it could be a beach run or something. But it's just having a ritual, something that everybody has to do. I think that's important for us anyway.
Yeah, and I love this idea because I played sports my whole life, and obviously there were those requirements to make the teams, especially at the higher levels. My one question to you in regards to continuing to do that in 2026 is, you know, society has just gotten so litigious, and there's issues around like disabilities, and there's some people have certain exceptions that maybe they can still perform the work at hand, but you hear attorneys always tell you that you can't selectively hire people for all this whole list of reasons. A lot of times certain physical traits may fall into some of those reasons. How have you navigated that? Because Boston, I'm sure, is probably even stricter than a place like Tampa might be with Massachusetts when it comes to some of those, protections that certain people have. How do you continue to do these physical tests and navigate that? Or have you ever had an attorney tell you that this is a little risky, that you might not hire somebody because they couldn't do that, but they can potentially make the argument that it isn't packing boxes or anything like that? I'm just curious how you've gotten your way to do it, because I love it, and I that's the one area that I think a lot of people might be asking, how do you navigate that?
Well, first of all, if you lined up 10 attorneys, you'd get at least 5 of them to tell them you couldn't do it. So,
Hmm.
and we've never actually run into that kind of a problem. But you're right, it could happen. But if you handle the interaction openly, and the only way it's going to be a problem is if the person is a complete jerk, and that such people exist. Somebody might try and pull something. I'll give you an example. Do you have a punch clock for your movers?
We no, we do it a little bit differently with the way that we do the hours for the guys with our software that we use, but it's not like a punch in, punch out.
Okay, well, we don't have a punch clock, and an attorney might tell you that you should have one, and you could have someone, in theory, sue you because they didn't get paid because they let's say they'd show up every day at 7, but they wouldn't get off the dock till 15 minutes later or something,
Right.
maybe
Yeah.
because someone's late or something else. Well, you have to have a situation where people are comfortable telling you if something isn't fair. But at the same time, if you punch a clock and then your crewmate is late for work, that could become something to celebrate. Now you can read the newspaper and get paid. But if you don't punch a clock, then 7 o'clock comes. Okay, guys, hit the road. You're going out a man short. And if the person, well, unless you've got a one-off situation where somebody is a trustworthy employee, they ran into a problem, they called in, and you made a decision either to wait for them or to have them meet them at the job or something. And maybe in a case like that, you'd say, "Hey guys, he's not going to be here till 7:30. Don't worry, we'll pay you for that half hour," because it's a one-off. But in general, it's going to be a negative for the guy if somebody else is late and they're not getting paid. But you know what? People are going to be on time. And if they are 5 or 10 minutes late, you know what? They're probably going to buy coffee or breakfast for the other guys and say, listen. So we've never had somebody make us think about it, which is sort of similar to your point with the stadium or something else. But I'll tell you something important about the stadium. In our business, now, I don't know if you've run into this, but let's say somebody has a chronic injury and maybe they didn't think of it. Maybe somebody else put it in their head. They say, listen, you know what you can do? You get a job with a moving company, and then you can say you got the injury there, and then you can collect, unemployment, or you can get an attorney and sue people. So if you have the stadium, you always say, now you don't have any physical limitations that would interfere with you doing this. And of course, they're going to say, oh, no. And then 2 or 3 sections in, then you hear about the knee, the hip, the back, the ankle. No, don't worry about it. I understand. I guess it's not going to work out for you. And you've just saved yourself a major claim. And we actually had it happen to us in DC, where they hired a guy without putting him through the test. And sure enough, he faked an injury and he got $100,000 settlement, which we probably had to pay 25 grand deductible. And I'm sure it damaged our.
Yeah. And with social media, I've seen videos where there are people that are basically career fraudsters, and they brag about it online, where they go job to job and look for ways that they can,
Yeah,
kind of.
yeah. So the stadium, it helps to, and another great thing about the stadium, sometimes people don't show up. Like say you're expecting 6 people and only 4 or 5 show up. That's something to celebrate, because if you didn't have the stadium, guess what? They would have showed up, and it weeds them out. Now, most of the people we hire haven't had moving experience, but when you hire an experienced mover, it's one of two things. Either they love the idea of the stadium, they want to work with a better class of company, or they it's slow where they are and they know we're busy and they want to get a job. I've seen guys like that do 3 or 4 sections, and then I've heard comments like, oh, I don't need this shit, and they just leave. Well, if that didn't happen, you'd be stuck with them, wouldn't you? And they'd have that attitude. But it's a risk we're willing to take. You can always be sued for anything at any time in this country. And you don't have to be right or wrong. It's who's got the meanest lawyers that wins. That's how it works. But
Usually only the lawyers win in a lawsuit. That's what I've found, is that
right, but
even if you're right, a lot of
yeah,
times you just have to pay a nuisance to go
yeah,
away.
even if you're right, and I mean, it's even if you've got good attorneys and stuff, that's going to cost you a lot of money, and it's going to be a very difficult job for them as well. We've had it happen. But we've been lucky. We've avoided lawsuits for the most part. We've been able to, either with customers or employees, we've been able to have a clean slate there. But I
Good.
mean, it's still expensive because just because you didn't have a lawsuit doesn't mean you have to give some customer something they didn't deserve. But we'll still do it. We're not going to end up with a bullshit customer.
It's a business decision. I learned that a long time ago. Sometimes you got to swallow your pride and your ego and just make a
That's
business
right.
decision because it's
That's
not
right.
worth the mess that if you just try to stand your ground and stay stubborn on whatever it might be. I want to take a second and tell you all about Tighten Up Training. As a co-founder, we've spent months and months and months and a lot of money pooling together resources from some of the best moving companies in the world. And we're excited to bring this to an online platform available to any mover to use at an affordable price. Tighten Up Training has over 200 videos, including mover training, your highest turnover position, so that you can reduce claims, streamline operations, give your team the tools to perform at the highest level of service that generate repeat and referral business and allow you to charge higher prices, as well as sales training, marketing training, business development, leadership. We're adding more content as we speak. We've got legal training in there. We've even got door-to-door training for the moving industry, thanks to Lenny Gray at the Moving Titan Retreat. We've seen a massive explosion of moving companies jumping on to Tighten Up Training since the last retreat, and people are loving it. And when you sign up and mention this podcast, we're going to give you a free 6-week onboarding course in order to learn how to hold your team accountable and get the entire team on the platform so that you can have the best off-season and summer season that you've ever had. So go to tightenuptraining.com, schedule your free demo today, and look forward to tightening up. I'm curious. So with 26 locations, obviously, you found great people from the beginning in Boston, and you promote from within and send people out to new cities to run branches. But just like life, business has its ebbs and flows and its ups and downs, and there's stormy weather that comes sometimes that as entrepreneurs we need to find ways to navigate it. I'm curious if you've ever had a situation with any of your branches where the culture started to slip. Maybe it was the peak of the summer, you had a full schedule for that month, and you didn't, you had enough guys to take on that work, and they start to see that. I call it the golden handcuffs, where you're a lot of movers get handcuffed to these bad apples, and they have no choice but to either stick it out with them to service the customers' jobs, or to pull the brakes and otherwise not be able to service the customer's job if they get rid of these bad apples. And the culture just becomes contagious. You got a cancer in there that spreads, and people start to the overall morale and the culture just decline. And it might be temporary, but I'm curious if you've experienced that in all of your years of doing this with a company of your size, and how you turned that ship around with the culture.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, it hasn't happened in an extreme level, but yeah, there's places where the leader maybe didn't fully understand the standard. And when that happens, you've got to have somebody else come in there and fix things. So we've been able to do that. But to your other question, you have to be ready to send people out to help. And usually there's no shortage of volunteers. So the manager says, look, for whatever reason, they're letting somebody go for a valid reason, or maybe they're unexpectedly losing somebody, but and plus they need a more experienced person. We'll fly somebody out there, and we'll even rent them an Airbnb or whatever we need to while we get through that. And it often actually helps the culture because the person coming out there is modeling what's expected, because that's not an option carrying on with subpar people, because as you said yourself, it's going to be toxic to the culture, and it'll change. And worst of all, you'll lose some of your really good people because they're not going to stick around. So because the only reason they're there is because it's fun to come to work, and they like a great atmosphere. So you have to be ready to do that, and you have to be ready to take a loss to do it, because if you've made commitments to customers You're not going to solve them by just pulling someone off a shelf somewhere. They need to meet the standard.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more, because if you keep a bad apple around, because you can't afford to lose them, then you're going to end up losing the good apples because they're not going to put up with the bad apples. So you're going
Yeah,
to lose somebody either way unless you step
yeah,
in and make something happen.
yeah. It's like I said, one bad apple is bad, but if it gets to the point where nobody's complaining about it, then you're in very serious trouble. Like if you have a culture where people are going to complain about a bad apple, then you've no one to blame but yourself. And it's something that I I think it's in the book somewhere. When a worker does something really stupid, at least it seems stupid, it's costing you a lot of money, and where was their head stuck when they did this? This is so unnecessary. You see, there's only two situations there. One is this is a really good worker who's proved themselves and they've made a stupid mistake. In that case, I'm a strong believer in mulligan management. You give someone a pass because you don't want to really come down hard on somebody that's been giving you their heart and soul all along. And it's hard because when somebody like that screws up, you're even more upset because how the hell could this happen? But you see, there's another situation where somebody makes a stupid mistake. Now, if you're going to get upset, start yelling and screaming, you should be yelling at yourself because you hired that idiot. Like, that person didn't belong here in the first place. Don't get angry with them. You're the guilty party. You brought them in. There had to be, because those kind of mistakes are never a surprise. Like, as opposed to the great worker doing something dumb, it's a bit of a shock. But sometimes it's, oh my God, like something happened on the job, and you look at the crew and you go, was it him? Yeah, yeah, of course. That's you. You're the one who put him there, and you've got to be accountable for that. So stuff like that is what makes you hyper vigilant about having the right people in the first place. Because you can't have people out there that are going to be incapable of making the right decision. I'll tell you a funny story. Like back in the early days, I had just hired a guy who he was highly recommended because he was a really great athlete and he was friends with some of the other guys who worked for me. And I often would say to somebody, why don't you load the truck? And they'd go, oh, well, no, don't worry. Just do your best and I'll keep an eye on you. And if I see something that doesn't look right, I'll step in, you see. So this guy, there was the old televisions, the big things with the screen in front.
Mm-hmm.
So he was loading the truck and I brought him out one of these. And of course, this is back in the day when you could wrap one of these up in a pad and put them somewhere safe in the load. You didn't necessarily have to box them, And I come into the truck and I see the television and it's not wrapped and it's being used as base and it's on the bottom of a tier with the screen facing the floor of the truck.
No.
You could talk about giving people training, but this person doesn't have the natural physics. They're the people you see on
Common
the
sense.
highway that make a maneuver that didn't they realize that could have got someone killed? It's like they don't understand physics. Like, okay, I had to back off with that person and he went through the summer just being let handle boxes because and I've had other people that shock the life out of you because you say, hey, would you like to start loading? And they do a perfect job and they've never had any training. They've just observed how I did it or something, and now they're doing it correctly. And by correctly, I mean in a way that nothing's going to break because they understand how something can break. You don't have to kind of sit them down and tell them if you put the fragiles on the bottom, they'll break or something. But I'm a big believer in letting people try stuff and seeing what they come up with.
Yeah, I'm shocked all the time by the person. I'm like, I don't think this guy will never work out, but we'll give him a try. And he turns out to be our star mover for the
Yeah,
summer, or vice versa.
right.
Somebody fits the bill. They're really strong. They're at the gym every day, and then they can't get a dolly over a curb with a washer on
No,
it.
I know, isn't it? And some of these people are gym rats.
Yeah.
And I remember bringing these scrawny kids over from Ireland that you wonder, can this guy handle the work?
Hmm.
But you know what? Determination. If you say to a kid like that, we're going up the stairs with this and don't let it hit the wall, they'll die first. And then you'll have this big gym rat, banging everything all over the place and all these muscles coming out everywhere. And so it's weird like that. But a lot of
Yeah,
it's up here,
it
you need
is.
people that are just determined to do it right and not get hurt.
Yeah, you'd think it's common sense half the time, but you hear all the time common sense isn't that common. And I'd love to know, like, hey, I guess this is a two-part question, but have you seen like the quality of the workforce when it comes to those, work ethic, common sense, desired to actually, want to work and serve the customer and be a team player over the years from the early 80s all the way to 2026? Are you noticing any trends with the labor pool over the course of those years, and how are you recruiting? What's your recruiting strategy to find the good ones if you know if that labor, well, regardless of if that labor force has declined? I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Well, one thing you're absolutely right about is it is a lot harder to find people. And I think the biggest challenge is kids have so many more options now. I mean, they can do something on a computer in their basement and make a lot of money producing nothing. It's that is sad, but it's still the best people are recommended by their friends that already work for you or worked for you a few years ago or something. And I had a really good kid in the last group. And I said, how did you end up here? And he said, you've moved my family a number of times ever since I was a small kid. And my parents were always really impressed with the people that would show up. And they said to me that I'd find a good environment here. So that was nice. It was nice to get somebody that way. So think about it. You're sending the right kind of people in, and they're making such an impression on the customer that they want their kid to work with you. That's actually happened quite frequently. But to your point, it is harder and harder. And obviously, the J1s from Europe, we would bat close to 1,000, the quality. Of course, we'd interview them and put them through. But people that are willing to go to another country and commit to you, you can't beat that. Like if you had a company in Europe and you had an American that went over there to work for the summer, you could be damn sure they'd be top shelf. But see, those visas have been cut off from us now. We can't get them anymore. And whereas if you hire Americans in the same way, you're not going to bat 1,000. You'll get some great people, but you'll be lucky to get 5 out of 10. And I mean, after you've vetted them and hired them, you'd be lucky to get five that'll stick with you. That
Hmm.
won't tell you that their girlfriend's parents are taking a trip in the Bahamas and they've invited you along. So, people think nothing of just walking out the door, and I think, yeah, it is the whole culture of hard work. And even trying to get athletes is challenging because they have so many other options.
Hmm.
But we do get some great athletes. That kid that just ran around in 24 minutes is a star lacrosse player, and he'll probably get a scholarship to college to play. So you are going to get some of those. But I think establishing relationships with coaches in high schools because they know who the first of all, they know the kids that don't really want to work behind a desk. And I mean, there are people who will tell you that when you ask them why they're there. And they'll say don't want to get stuck behind a desk. They don't want to work with 40 other people in workstations. And they want to be out and about and they want to be meeting people. So they're coming in for all the right reasons. But you got to get it out there. And we've had coaches send us people and say, you're going to like this person. They're going to do well for you. But of course, the right coach is only going to do that when it's absolutely the right person. They're not just going to shovel you people that are looking for a job.
Mm-hmm.
They know. I mean, when you're out on the practice field, you know who the people with the giant hearts are.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, you see their work ethic, in the weight room in the off season during a game when it's crucial. Their ability to work as a team, how they handle wins and losses. I mean, that's a great resource, and I like that idea a lot. We just hired a couple 18-year-old kids that just graduated that were referred by another business owner that I know. They're one of their sons and their friends, and my ops manager came in yesterday and he was saying, he's like, those boys are running circles around some of these other guys that are growing men that,
Yeah.
they're, that's, yeah, we need to find more of these guys.
And
And
make sure nobody's telling them to slow down.
yeah, I know that. Well, that was my immediate next thing is like, okay, well, we need to keep them away from anybody that they're running circles around so that they
Well,
don't get that.
I mean, maybe somebody can keep up with them, but you know what they have to do? They have to compliment them and say, "Hey, I really appreciate your hustle. You're really making this job easier for the rest of us. Thank you.
Mm,
Maybe I can't hustle at your speed, but in other words, you encourage it as opposed to saying, slow down, you're showing us up.
I like
Because
that.
if they're worried about someone running circles around them, you should maybe not have them on your team.
I agree. I agree. And there's, probably some of the fat that needs to get trimmed right now. But, I think that's from my previous question earlier about, being loaded up with work and, having some people that, aren't going to make it, but we got to get the job serviced. That can be a challenge in
Well,
balancing.
well, you probably know this, but we offer a guarantee on all of our workers.
We've started doing that as well. Actually, I think it was after our last podcast we started doing that.
Right. And with those particular people, you can say to a customer ahead of a job, we really want to know that you're happy with these people because we will refund the money for them if you're not. Well, it keeps you honest, but it also, your workers know it, but also if they do get called out by a customer, like I've had it happen, we're never going to say anything to the worker because it could be bullshit. But if it's repeating itself, then it's time for conversation. You're just not impressing our customers, and that's job number one: impress the customer.
How do you handle accountability, especially, this time of the year where you got to keep everybody in good spirits, keep the culture and the morale high, but maybe somebody isn't meeting a certain expectation or, there's some kind of an issue in some area, but, if you go tell them before their job starts in the morning during dispatch, even if you pull them to the side, that might disgruntle them or it might discourage them or they might get upset in one way or another, and you don't want to set that tone going out to a job site. But at the same time, when they come back from a job site, if you have to have those difficult conversations after they've just been sweating in the sun all day and 100-degree heat, that they may not be very appreciative of that either. I think what you just said about encouraging the positive behavior with the carrot, and rewarding and recognizing that is great. But when it comes to, disciplining or holding people accountable, that may be good. Maybe they're just having a bad day. Maybe they're just slipping up in one area that they need to work on. But overall, you don't want to lose this person or you don't want to disgruntle this person, but they do need to be held accountable for whatever thing that they did. What's your strategy on that?
Okay, well, first of all, never under any circumstances say anything negative to somebody at the end of the day. Like you said yourself, they've been out in the hot sun, working, sweating, etc. The only thing that you can say to somebody in that situation is, thanks for a hard day's work. I really appreciate your effort today. Now, when you say that to somebody, well, if you read about it in a book, it's called putting money in the bank. You put money in with, but to your other point earlier, when somebody's going out on a job, you have a perfect license to say to them, look, today this job is going to involve this, this, and this. And it's very important that you adhere to this and take care of these things, because we've had some situations in the past where it hasn't happened. And you need to put that stake in the ground at the beginning of the job before they head out. And then you have to remember when they come back to say, after what I said to you this morning, thanks very much. You listened and you took care of it. But the other thing that I think is equally important is coaching your people around feedback. Because, and I was talking to people in an orientation just the other day, and I was talking about when I was in my 20s and I was working as an engineer, I would get upset when people would give me feedback I didn't agree with. And the fact is, it was because I was immature and I was a horse's ass. I mean, somebody's giving you feedback, you should listen to it and try to gain. They're kind enough to try to help you. So you teach people, and I sort of say, well, look, if you ask your crew chief at the end of a job, how did I do today? What do you think they're going to say? And what they're going to say is, hey, no, you did fine. You did fine, kid. Don't worry about it. And I said, do you think that's always going to be true? I mean, what else are they going to say? So if you want feedback about yourself, you've got to convince the other person you really need to hear it. And you've got to say something like, okay, I did okay, but what's one thing that maybe I could work on? So you get people into the mindset of accepting feedback and understanding that even if it's not completely accurate, somebody is only trying to help you improve. So the energy you waste getting upset, it basically is, well, it's fucking up your life. Let me put it that way. It's putting you in a situation where you can't take advantage of someone that's trying to help you. But here's a question that I ask them. I say, okay, let's say you get feedback and it's got no validity, that you know it's not true. They're saying something that you know they're wrong. It doesn't have any validity, because I've just explained to them that there's always a 99% chance that there's at least 1% of truth, and look for that and try and improve. But what about if there's no 1% of truth, if it's just completely wrong? What do you say? And if they give me the right answer, I hand them $50. And it's rare that you get the right answer. If you have women in the room, you're more likely to get the answer from them. They're more likely to have the answer. But the number of people that'll say to you, okay, what would I say in that situation? I would say, thank you. Thanks for the feedback. End of story. Almost nobody says that. They sort of say, they'll say stupid things like, oh, could you elaborate, or could you be more specific, or some stupid nonsense. What's the point of saying any stupid thing like that when you know it's wrong in the first place? Or they'll say something like, you don't understand. Let me explain why you're wrong about that. Bullshit all around. There's only one answer. Thanks for the feedback. Because when you say that, you're showing the other person that it's okay to give you feedback. And the next time they give you feedback, it might be, hey, remember what I said to you a couple of weeks ago? Disregard. But here's something that I think really is more to the point that you can benefit from. And sorry, I was wrong before. But they wouldn't say anything, because once you start arguing with people, they'll stop giving you feedback because they don't need the hassle. Nobody needs to deal with somebody who's getting defensive. And that was me back in my 20s. Like, I would literally, even if I didn't say anything, I was getting upset. I'd been busting my ass, and now they're giving me this shit feedback that I think is not fair. It was just immaturity on my part, but it's typical for young people. And of course, you know people that are 50 and 60 years old who still haven't figured it out. But it's typical for young people, and they need to learn that in your whole life, all the feedback you're going to get is going to fit on one flash drive CD. You know, it's just one page of paper. So it's precious, it's valuable, and you should try and take advantage of every bit of feedback you get because it's thin underground. You don't get much feedback. And there's the funny one about I had this happen actually. I won't tell you the whole story, but it ended up with this other driver just going, "Fucking asshole." And I said, "Hey, thanks for the feedback." You know, because I had actually done something stupid. In my defense, I didn't realize it right away until it was too late. Like I moved over my lane without checking, and he just came out of nowhere. I had to swerve. Where the hell did he come out of? I was, and then he was so angry, and I went, "Hey, thanks for the feedback." But you know, that's it. You know, let people know that you're open to it, and I mean, it helps to give some training in that regard. So people do it. You know, we haven't done it in years, but one we used to hire an acting company. They came in with two or three people, and they would do, you know, little scenes like pretend scenes where they'd be customers and you
Like
know
role play,
role
basically.
play, yeah, role play
Okay.
stuff, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think the best thing about it was people would still be talking about it months later.
That's
But
fun.
you know how to do. Like you get somebody to be an angry customer, and so you'd have a professional actor just screaming their head off, and then you have a mover, and it's only role play, but they have to deal with it, and it's good to get that practice because
Absolutely.
it's really hard. I mean, sometimes customers will be mistaken about something. They might get really angry. You probably haven't got to the part in the book where we had a guy at Channel Giant that used to always be playing practical jokes. One of his favorite ones was to
I think
rap.
I did get to that part, but go
Yeah,
ahead. Yeah, yeah.
that was fun. Yes, because the customer had been in a former life on the stage in New York, just in choruses and stuff. But they said, "Hey, you want to show your chops," and it was, you know, when Henry comes out of the house, we're going to drop this bureau and you get angry with him. And it was so funny because, you know, as he was coming out of the house, they started turning and they'd no wrap on this and the drawer started coming out and Henry's going, "Hey, guys, guys, guys." And then woof, the whole thing smashes onto the ground because she was going to get rid of it. And then she turned on Henry and she just lit into him. "What will you mean bringing me these baboons?" You know, she started tearing into him because of what, you know, the other guy did. But, you know, obviously she was gone from Broadway long enough that she couldn't maintain it. She started laughing in the middle of it. But
Oh yeah, that's great. I love that. I love that. And that just goes to show, back to the culture about having fun and loving the work that you're doing and finding ways to engage the customer and make it, make it enjoyable because it's not always enjoyable, but you gotta make lemonade if you have lemons.
yeah, yeah. I mean, 30 years later, she's probably still telling people that story.
Well, Larry, this has been awesome. I had a feeling we were going to run a little over an hour because I could talk to you all day. And I'm really excited to see you really less than 2 months. You'll be down this way at the Moving Titan Retreat. And I will be finished with heavy lifting, building a business with a giant heart by then. Probably be finished in the next week or two with it, to be completely honest because I'm trying to squeeze in a page every time I can between a call or a meeting or whatever. So it's really good stuff. And thank you for putting that together and for coming
Thanks.
on
And
the
it's just
podcast today.
it's
Go ahead.
available on Amazon. You did mention that, I think.
On Amazon. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Are you
yeah.
going to do an audiobook for it? Have you decided that yet?
There's talk about it possibly, but not for a while. I'm really busy in the next couple of months. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
I think so. Different people have asked me about that.
I think a lot of movers listen to a lot of audiobooks. I do both. I'll listen to those while I drive or while I'm doing chores, and then I'll read. But what I love about reading, like physically reading, is you just get ideas that you use like a different part of your brain where your wheels start to go more than audio. And it helps to, I use a pen, actually this purple pen, as my bookmark, and I'm constantly just, making notes and drawing little ideas that pop into my head to really study it. So go get your copy. It's on Amazon. It's called Heavy Lifting, Building a Business with a Giant Heart by the Gentle Giant, Larry O'Toole, and come meet him at the Moving Titan Retreat, September 2nd to the 4th. I'm going to make sure I get an autograph when you're there, because I need you to sign it for me.
Happy to.
Well, thanks, Larry. This has been a pleasure. And we will see you soon. And thank you again for everything that you do and continue to do, and the wisdom that you instill.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Grow Your Moving Company podcast. This has been a fun one and a very enlightening one. Until next time, we'll see you later, and tighten up.
Tighten up.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Grow Your Moving Company podcast. If you'd like to learn more about any of the sponsors listed on this show, want to apply for the next Moving Titan retreat, or interested in owning or working for a Two College Brothers franchise, drop me a line at wade@twocollegebrothers.com. Moving out. Have a great day.